Yet another one from Albany did just that, bite the dust. It already sounded like a broken record, but here we go again. Former Democratic leader in the state Senate, John Sampson, he is accused of using his office for personal gain. Let's get the details now from Andrew Whitman here, and it's starting to sound like a broken record, and we're getting word even today, Andrew, that there could even be more names, as many as 6 or 7 more here that could also be going down in this ongoing probe.
I know how surprising that would be, Rich. John Sampson yesterday surrendered to federal agents. He was arraigned on charges that he embezzled $440,000 from the sale of foreclosed properties, also obstruction of justice and witness tampering. The Times reporting Sampson reached out to a friend in the U.S. Attorney's Office and asked him to turn over the names of all cooperating witnesses who can make a case against him so Sampson could, quote, take them out. Sampson is now the 32nd state politician to be indicted or convicted of a crime, censured, or otherwise accused of misbehaving in just the past 7 years. Rich?
All right, let's bring in our panel on this. Let's bring in O'Brien Murray, Republican political consultant who managed the campaign for former Congressman Bob Turner, Dominic Carter, political journalist, author, Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, and Andrew, who you have already met here. And Richard, we're getting word today, as I mentioned off the top, that there could be more names through these wiretaps, as many as 6 to 7 more potentially. This is going from bad to worse.
It's getting worse and worse, but it's got to be seen in its proper perspective. What is the proper perspective, he said.
Well,
there are 2. One, if this is the spate in the last 7 years, it must have been that the previous 15 before that, things were pretty good. Note that the dysfunctional Albany crowd was never louder than back when, 10, 12 years ago, in the pre-Spitzer years. So the question of whether this is cyclical, a statistical anomaly, we ought to think about that. But the more important problem is that the real ethical challenges in Albany are not the legal ones. The big ethical challenges are all legal behaviors, campaign finance stuff, the Wilson-Pakula stuff. And if we're looking for a government that actually serves people, let us pay attention to the indictments, but let us pay attention to the system-wide legal problems that are much more affecting the lives of average
Richard, this has
Americans.
nothing to do with Wilson-Pakula. This has nothing to do with campaign finance. These issues that we've seen as of late are purely and simple people that feel they've got so much power and they get corrupted. So I wouldn't even go down the path of the other issues. You've got individuals here that have decided, I have so much power, I don't think anyone's going to catch me or arrest me.
You don't understand the position I'm in. I'm sitting here with him.
Yeah.
And he's busy pointing out that I served in the legislature.
Well, you did.
If I'm a little sensitive, you'll understand why.
But let me ask you a different question to you, though, because you were 36 when you got elected to the Assembly?
39.
39. Bring you back to 39.
It wasn't like this.
Wasn't that long ago?
It wasn't that.
But if it was,
like this.
you're getting my point. If it was like this now, young guy, Harvard guy, world ahead of him, believes in all this, at least let me get my question before you dismiss it. Would you still want to be a part of the crowd?
I hereby dismiss it. No one has to be part of any crowd. You don't have to be a crowd.
Would you want to?
I would want to do the work I did, and I did it well, and it benefited a lot of people, and I'm glad I did it, and I do it again. But it's not about me. That point that this is about individuals who criminals or alleged criminals is a well-taken point. My point is equally well taken. There are problems. They are not going to be solved by getting rid of the criminals if we leave the systemic ethical lapses untouched.
But let's go back to one of the other issues you're talking about, systemic issues. When you ran for Attorney General, were you able to campaign on, I'm going to throw the bums out that are doing things illegally? You couldn't do that because you needed their support. And it was nothing against you. It's part of the system.
Baloney.
And it's the same thing with Elliot Spitzer.
Go
when he
back and read what I said.
But when
I campaigned for the right of the Attorney General to bring corruption cases. Please.
Okay. But Elliot Spitzer, when he was the Attorney General, was he going to go against the elected officials that he needed their support for?
Well, he certainly talked
Andrew
that
Cuomo,
way, didn't he?
But he didn't.
Well, I don't know that Elliot Spitzer's a role model for anything.
But Andrew Cuomo didn't do it either, though. Did he bring corruption charges against anybody?
Perfect segue, because we'll get to who's driving this and who isn't. But, Andrew, I seem to remember Mr. Cuomo choosing a certain prop behind him and telling everybody how it was going to be much different. There was a new sheriff in charge and he was going to shake up Albany. Let's remind everybody a little bit about both the optics and the language.
Well, it was the day that he announced his candidacy for governor. He did so at the Tweed Courthouse, and he actually referenced it in the speech that he made at the time. Let's play that clip if we have it.
We stand today next to one of the historic monuments to government corruption. This is the Tweed Courthouse. Well, unfortunately, Albany's antics today could make Boss Tweed blush.
Okay. I happen to think he's been a pretty good governor, but blah, blah, blah. The guy driving all of this, right, is the U.S. Attorney. And among other things here, we're getting our information from the likes of a Nelson Castro and a Shirley Huntley, who are wearing wires here and are hardly the paragons of virtue. That's where we're getting this stuff from. It's not that the governor's driving this. We're getting people to flip on other people. You know, some of the less favorables to turn on, and some of even potentially the even lesser favorables, if I can butcher the language.
But the people
That's true.
The people that flipped are those that got caught doing something wrong in the first place. They weren't sitting there saying, let's go fix the system and go through this.
Forgive me, but understand why Andrew Cuomo was wrong in his comparison. In the Boss Tweed years, what was being sold were the large activities of government. What's happening now is people are enriching themselves on small, stupid things that are not affecting the large policies on taxes, education policy, healthcare policy. What the Tweed machine did is corrupt the entire government. These clowns are corrupting themselves and a few isolated people
Fair
around.
enough, but
That
Richard,
difference matters.
when I heard what Sampson said, or was alleged to have done, Dominic, in his last words, want to find out some names so I can take them out. He wasn't being literal, let's hope here, okay? But the fact, I mean, when you listen to some of the language from this guy, from the Espadas of the world, I'm going to speak for him, okay, because you never want to be in these people's company, and they go there, and they're glorified guys who are doing shakedowns for influence peddling, whether it's for chump change or for real money here. My God, I mean, I knew it was bad, but this is just, you want to wash your hands when you hear these guys talk.
I don't want to get in trouble with Mr. Brodsky tonight, but I am telling you, Richard, and I stand by it.
God, here we
50% of the legislature could be indicted
80%
criminally.
of journalists
Could be indicted criminally for what goes on in Albany.
baloney.
Now, Brodsky is a straight guy, an honest guy, an admirable guy. Most of these clowns up in Albany are not. You know what they are? Many of them, they're not the only ones doing this, but they're an embarrassment to communities of color. They are poverty pimps that realized the latest game was to get elected to public office and they could steal from
Let's
there.
just be clear. Joe Bruno had a position of authority here. We talked about Sampson, Malcolm Smith here, Espada, whatever you think of these folks, they all had leadership positions.
And they should have never been in leadership.
And I guess my question
ever.
is that just common sense, or is it?
There's been an outbreak of this stuff. It's happened over the last 3 or 4 years.
Is it just that they're
Forgive
getting
me,
caught
Dominic,
now, or have they always
because
been
you were
doing it?
nice to me.
No, but Richard,
there are
have
plenty
they-
of people in every community. Vinnie
But
Lybell,
Richard,
Joe Bruno.
but is it just that they're getting caught now, or has it always been going on?
They're getting caught now, and they should be getting caught. There's better law enforcement. This was not the way of the world 15 years ago. Something is different, and that could be personality. It could be a lot of things. I just want to go back to where I started. That for things that affect the public, they are infinitely more affected by the ethical challenges brought by legal behavior, campaign finance reform, Wilson Pakula, than they are of these series of idiotic
I'll give you the last word on this.
So why don't we talk about term limits for chairman of committees? Why don't we start
That's
doing
not
it?
gonna
Well,
change
it'll
any of
start
this.
because. And what about eliminating pensions for all elected officials so people have less of an incentive to stay around for so long?
You want to be
because
scared
you
a
can't
little
do
bit?
term limits.
You want to be scared a little bit? You weren't here for this, and I know I'm heavy at least, but I just want to get to the clip. Our good friend Tom Doherty. And for those who don't know, Tom Doherty served directly with Governor Pataki. He's got a lot of clients, certainly that have influence in Albany right now. And this was an indictment, not just on one party by any means, but on the system. I want you to listen to what he had to say about how he has seen this problem escalate to where we are today. Let's take a listen.
politicians now accumulate this mass campaign fund, okay, that doesn't go for their direct mail, their TV, their radio spots, their volunteers to pay campaign workers. It goes to furnish a lifestyle so that when they go to a nice restaurant, Dominic knows, they want to go away somewhere, they use these funds as a guise of, I'm using it for political purposes. And they can't live without it anymore. It's a way to make a life of a normal life become a lavish lifestyle.
Tom, a lot happier after last night with the Rangers won after being down 0-2, but that for another night here. Is that part of the problem here where it's become almost a full-time job for a lot of guys? They're not getting a full-time salary and they supplement their ways.
Those are criminal behaviors if they are occurring. They ought to be punished as criminal behaviors. There's been an outbreak of it. We ought to deal with it. But the basic problems are the problems of big money in politics, huge contributions, and odds and ends kinds of things. A Mike Bloomberg, who was personally as honest as the day is long, did more to influence the public process by spreading out his money than any of these other guys ever did.
But there has to be a way to discourage those guys from getting into it in the first place.
Send them to jail.
Well, no, that's after the fact. You're still going to wind up electing people who are looking to line their own pockets into positions of influence.
The largest source of pickpocketing arrests in Old England was at the hangings of pickpockets. Criminals are criminals. They are not subject to the kind of rational restraints that you and I would normally think would work.
All right. As we mentioned off the top here, unfortunately, it could be yet another chapter to this. In fact, I think there will be. We, of course, will keep you updated. All right, when we come back, we're going to go across the river, if you will. Chris Christie, he underwent weight loss surgery that we're just learning about now, and he says it had nothing to do with political aspirations. Many, though, are questioning that. We're going to get into the politics of appearance, but also how it applies to this guy, one of the most talented politicians, I think, in America. Stay with us.